step number 1 is to just wet your paper, and what we're doing is stretching the paper, but we won't be taping it because we don't have that much of time today. Just wet your paper and leave it to dry. So essentially we just stretch the paper the quickest way we can. I'm not wetting the other side because I've put plenty of water on this.
We're all coming to watch, or?
I'm going to finish the demo in 20 minutes. You can take as much time as you need, because the truth is the salt will take some time to dry. So the entire painting would be ready maybe end of the day or tomorrow. Yeah. So I'm just folding my paper in 2 halves so I can sort of show you
So
two
just
things at the same time.
watercolor paper and
Yeah. If you have a stable hand. So the reason I am doing this in 2 pieces is on the left hand side we just have a test run, and so the left hand side or right hand side doesn't matter, we just test what the salt does. We do a warm-up exercise, and then the right hand side is where I'm going to do the snowman. So just as an example of what you could do with salt texture is it gives you really nice backgrounds which can be interpreted in various ways. Now I just left this one because to me for some reason that looks like it's ready to make an animal of some kind, so I'll explore that later. But salt with watercolors it's a fun technique. It's also unpredictable. It's very unpredictable, so you'll see that I've used the same salt. I'm using table salt here, but see the different effects I've got. And
I like the first one.
I'll just share some of the tips to sort of minimize things that could go wrong. So there are different types of salts available in the market. What I have today is table salt because I sort of like that texture, but every salt, say Himalayan salt or cooking salt, is going to give you a different kind of texture. So my tip would be start with a test paper, try out different salts, and whatever you find is best for your project, go with that salt. Okay, then the other thing why I got you all to stretch the paper is sometimes you have to work really quickly with the salt. I'll just draw a snowman while I tell you all. Going to draw a border. So if you don't stretch your paper, what's going to happen is occasionally with certain pigments like paints, gray, the paper absorbs the pigment too quickly and it does not react well with the salt because the pigment's already sort of gone into the paper. And what we want is a really wet paper, because unless the paper is really wet, you cannot get the salt reaction to sort of have the textures, the mottled texture that we want. Alright, I'm going to leave it at that. I am tempted to add a few more things, but I won't. So that's the reason. All of these I haven't stretched. None of these have been stretched, which is why in that section there, can you see how the pigment's just gone in, and then when I put the salt there was no reaction. So step number 1, draw the snowman in, and then on this side we'll just have a bit of fun just to see what the salt does. So I'm using the rough side, and we are going to be working wet on wet. You cannot do this technique on a dry paper. You just sort of, and for the color I'm using ultramarine blue with a hint of Payne's gray, but if you just want to use ultramarine blue and not maybe darken it, it's completely up to you. So where did I put the paper? And then you're just going to drop the color in. Do not massage it in, you just want to drop it in. And usually in watercolors I sort of say start with a light hand, start with a light hand. With this one you do the opposite, because you want just about enough pigment for the salt to react with. Okay, if there's not enough water and not enough pigment, you just won't see the texture. Now I've seen a few tutors on YouTube say that you've got to wait and let the water settle in before you add the salt, but I say it really depends on the salt. Now see, with this table salt, can you see how the pigment is just going all the way close to the salt granules, and then you're getting tiny dots? So if you work with another salt, you might notice that it's actually pushing the pigment out rather than absorbing it in. Now be gentle with the amount of salt that you use. Start with sprinkles, because occasionally sections like that, while it's drying, it's just going to, you know, come together, melt and form like a rock, and then it's very hard to brush it off when it's dry. If that happens, there are ways to clean it up without destroying the paper, but we'll cross that bridge if and when we get there. So let me try with a brown color, like something like that. See, I started dry on dry. What was I going to show you? Yeah, just let me do that, and let's see what happens when there's not enough pigment. This will still get textures.
So when you say, sorry, there's not enough pigment, you've just gone light with your colour.
Yes, this will still work. So this is just to show you different effects. If you wanted a lighter mottled background, just go with very little salt, because there's just not enough pigment there and you don't want too much salt. How about I show you what happens when you put a lot of salt? Lot of salt. Let's go heavy-handed here, and we'll let that dry and see what happens. Okay. And then in another area, this particular example here, I might mention that it was just an abstract texture that came out, and I sort of teased out what shapes can I see in there and got that structure in there. So I would suggest make a few circles, have maybe 2 colors, and then see what results out of it.
So these two you started with water on the page, and these two you started with water not on the page.
Yep. But even so,
No,
can you
it's
see
because of the
how much of water I have even with the paint? There's a lot of water there. Salt. Another thing you want to be mindful of, it's a good idea to use masking fluid when you're creating salt textures. The reason being, sometimes once the salt has gone onto the paper, you won't be able to get another layer of paint on it, because it tends to spread. So just to show you something that happened here, that reindeer or stag there, it has actually 5 legs, because the 5th leg decided to just spread out, and I tried to cover it with grass, and then eventually ended up completing that with a pen. So that's not watercolor. So there are ways around fixing mistakes, but I'm sure each one of you will have a different kind of struggle, and that will give us the opportunity. Oh, I got brown there, that's all right.
So in the first instance, we're just doing circles, and we're not drawing the snowman, we're just...
Yeah, that's like an experiment, so
Yeah, so
it's
we
just
do
for
that
you to
first, yeah.
study, and don't worry about that brown color there. I'm just going to drop that in, but again, let me just wet the paper first, and I'm going to paint around the snowman just so that yes, I can add details as I need, and the salt doesn't destroy.
You've got a frame around it.
Yeah, paint around the snowman, because if the salt reacts, and you don't want to paint all the way down, you want to leave the bottom section white. So I have wet enough, and don't worry about brush strokes with this project. Let the water do its job, because usually we try to guide the brush strokes to do something. Here, don't do that, just let it flow and dropping the pigment. That's a paint spray I have there. So I'm just being very loose and fast and not worried about perfection, because the water is going to do the job for me. I want more pigment in certain parts. This Payne's gray I've found it settles in really quickly with the paper. So if you have Payne's gray, you work quickly. Where's the salt gone? There. So essentially that's step one. Draw the snowman in, drop the salt, let it dry, and you can then come back and complete the snowman. I do have something that I painted previously.
If you don't put enough salt, can you come back, wet it and put more?
Not really.
No.
You could try, but what happens is the salt, it changes the surface of the paper, and actually salt, it might be even impacting the archivalness of a paper, because it is salt and it does interfere with the surface texture. So that's the reason a lot of good brand companies have brought in mediums that you can add to get that granulation, so you're not destroying the archivalness. So I'll put that aside and let that dry. So then once that's dry, see this one I didn't get nice texture, but when I sort of finish this I'll show you how to fix it. So step number 2 is to complete the snowman. So we want a purple, but we are going to mix. Stop, go.
If you squeeze it at the top,
Yeah.
it sucks it back in.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, sometimes.
Alright, so I'm just going to use that same blue I had there. So feel free to use up the purple here. And so I'm just trying to create a bluey purple, but making sure that I've used the blue that I have used in the background. And then again wet on wet. Now this is important because we don't want a very harsh
Oh, I see.
line. So all you're going to do is shadows, and then you're going to wet that left hand side, because I'm sort of imagining light coming from this side, and then make sure that you are destroying the edge there.
He's changed his outlook.
What's that?
The nose is on the other side on that one.
And that one's got him up,
Him
and
up,
that one's
yeah,
got a hat.
Yeah,
I just want to show you, see how you're getting that,
yeah, that line there.
yeah, that line. Then that happens because the salt has sort of gone into,
Ah,
Yeah.
I get you. Yes.
and also because I had pigment in my brush, see that harsh line?
Yeah.
That's what you want to avoid. So make sure your brushes are clean, but I'm going to try and destroy it as much as I can, and then go for the shadow under the hat on the left hand side. Just dropping a little bit. And then all you're going to do is color in all the different sections of your painting. So just going to do that.
That was
It's enough.
This one does not have
Oh,
an
nice.
arm. You're right, we need to give the snowman an arm.
No, we don't need to give him an arm. I thought that was his arm. But it's
He's
not.
got
It's
arms
his
and all the
scarf.
rest.
It's the tag of his scarf.
So I will put some stripes into the scarf later. But how about I give him an arm?
You don't have to give him an arm. I was just.
I want to give him an arm. Poor thing doesn't have an arm. There you go. It's got an arm now. And that one's got a spread, isn't it? Let it spread. That's okay. So that's step 2. I would have completed the eyes and the hat, but that essentially would be
He's
step
got a
2
birdie.
done. And yeah, I didn't want to give this one. It's got a little birdie on the head.
The bird with
But
very
use
cold
your
feet.
creativity.
feet.
You can do anything you like. It's sort of, you know, free to use your imagination. I don't have a towel here, but feel free to use your imagination, and it doesn't need to be just a snowman with arms. You can have a hat. So I'm going to detail that out with a pen. But yes, that's step 2. I forgot to put the shadow underneath here, but try not to come all the way down. This paper is absorbing water like anything because I haven't stretched it properly. I haven't stretched it at all. See how the paint gray is just going in?
Yeah, it's spreading quite nicely actually.
And there's some of that now getting into the snowman, but that's okay. So that's step number 2. So step number 1 was do the salt background. Step number 2 is add the shadows, let it dry, and then come back and you can enhance the shadows a little bit more if you like. And then it's all a matter of coloring in the branch, the nose with just solid colors. You really don't need to worry too much about adding stuff and perfection. Like in these two, can you see how the background color's gone in and this is gone? So don't worry about being too perfect.
It's
Once
a bit
you
of snow.
Yeah, it's a bit of
once you
snow.
reach this step, you could use a stiff brush to splatter some white snow, or you could simply take some pure white paint, if I can find it in my box. Where did the white paint go?
What? Wash?
Oh, beautiful. So splattering is fun if you have a stiff brush to do that. So sorry, drop that.
You don't look sorry.
Thank you. I don't look sorry? What should I do to look sorry?
Right.
Thank you. So to do the splatter, you need to use a toothbrush or a stiff brush. This brush isn't very stiff. If you don't have a toothbrush, just gonna mix that. Use a pointy one. Create some really liquid
Serious
paint.
water.
Yeah, you need very runny paint, very runny paint, and then you just do that. All right, I'm just going to splatter that in a few places.
How cool is that?
That is pretty cool.
Doesn't matter if it gets onto the snowman because he's standing in snow. So if I had taped that, I would have got a nice crisp border, but that's all right. It's a good idea to do a test run splatter just to make sure you're not getting a big blob, because occasionally if there's too much of water, you might end up getting a big blob. See, like that one, but that's okay. We'll just pretend that's a big blob of hailstone.
Different size snow.
Yeah. But that's how you can finish this one. And I think that's done. For me, that's done. I would sort of come back and when you all are too busy with your own paintings, tidy up a few things. But really, this is a very easy, fun thing to try. And this one, I suggest if you are worried about starting that, just have fun with a rectangular patch, okay? And then once that's dry, I've got this silhouette. You just place it there, trace it, fill it up with black paint, add some grass, and that one would be like that.
Okay.
That example there. Okay?
Awesome.
So if you're feeling nervous about starting with the snowman, start with the deer silhouette.
Okay.
Just let me know, then I can get the photocopy.
Okay. Thank
Cool.
you.